here we go. Hello everyone and welcome. We can see people signing in, signing on. We're so happy that you're here. Welcome, welcome. All right. Hello, hello. I'm just gonna keep saying hello until that attendee number stops climbing. Erin, if it's possible, you might want to hide people who don't have their video on. Welcome, everyone. All right, it is 4:02, so I am going to get started. So good afternoon. Welcome once again to our Zooming in and out on inclusionary practices with Katie Novak and Shelley Long, session 3. My name is Lindsay Stevens, and I am the Executive Director at the Center for Strengthening the Teaching Profession. And it's my great honor to welcome you this afternoon as the project lead for the Inclusionary Practices Project through waOSPI. I would like to start by saying that we have interpretation services and language access. So you can access those by using the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Here are some directions for what that would look like. And then you can also see we have our ASL interpretation going on right here in our panel. I would like to welcome you again to this third session in the series. It's sponsored by the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Cadre, which is made up of all the organizations you see represented on your screen. And once again, I just want to point out that this was a collaborative process between all of these partners who have worked over the past 4 years together to create a statewide movement dedicated to inclusion. And each of the organizations here tonight have played a part in the planning, facilitation, and realization of this series. And we will continue to show how incredibly important this work is to all of us. We know that it's important to our state, and we're going to continue to work together to make true systemic change focused on creating schools, districts, and systems where all students feel that they are valued and belong. I would also like to once more respectfully acknowledge that the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction is located on the traditional lands of the Squaxin Island Nation, and I myself am on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe, where the Puyallup people have lived and stewarded since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. Both are descendants of the maritime people who lived and prospered along the shores of the southernmost inlets of the Salish Sea. I'd also like to acknowledge that as a statewide coalition and audience, we are all on the ancestral lands of the many tribes of Washington, and with Shelley and Katie, beyond even our state. We make this acknowledgement to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for our sovereign tribal partners and all Indigenous students, families, and staff in our community. I invite you now, if you know and so wish, to share the tribal lands you are joining us from or your nearest areas. Okay. Before we move on, here are some of our webinar logistics. Please use the Q&A function if you have any questions for our presenters today. The chat is open, but we won't be taking any questions from there. So you can go ahead and talk to one another, but we can't quite keep up with it. Clock hours will be made available after the completion of all three this session, and participants must have registered to receive the clock hours and access to simultaneous interpretation. It will take us a bit to get those out with over 1,000 participants. It's a really, really wonderful thing to have, but it will take a little bit longer than normal to get those surveys and clock hours to you. And there is also a link to the live stream there if you have others out there who you would like to bring into the live stream. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to our fearless presenters, Shelley and Katie. And thank you so much and welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Katie.
Hey, how is everyone doing today? Let us know with some emojis or some words how you're all feeling right now on this lovely Monday evening. My gosh, look at this. We have celebrations, some hearts, some claps.
That's a new feature.
I love the feature. It makes me very happy.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, so are you ready to rock it tonight, Shelley?
I'm so ready. You know, I think I learned about sharing the remote. Do you know about this feature?
Well, I don't know about the feature, but I do know that today I was presenting and then I got this like mystery message, like someone wants to access your screen. I'm like, ew. But I feel like maybe this is what you're talking about.
Because remember how last time I'm just like, Katie, turn the slide. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way.
Okay, teach us all right now.
Well, now I'm looking and I can't find it. Hold on. Maybe I can only work in meetings. Whatever.
Perfect. Okay,
I'm just going to say, Katie, next slide.
Okay, I mean, that works out really well for us. Now,
I thought I could.
What I want to do while Shelley tries to figure out how to bring back her tech magic, we started off this title slide with seed packets, and I would love for the people who have been here in previous sessions to share what they remember about seed packets in the chat for our friends who might not have been at previous sessions. And Shelley, could you give us like a 2-minute synopsis? Why on earth would we be starting this off with seed packets?
First of all, Alicia's telling me that it is only for meetings. So we're just going to have to go ahead and be creative. So seed packets. So seed packets was a metaphor that we introduced, I think, in the first session, the second session. And basically, if you don't know about some of the work that I'm trying to do, it's to dismantle and evolve individual education plans. I feel like and many people feel like they require a lot of resources, but they're not necessarily as useful because historically IEPs weren't designed to be used in inclusive classrooms. And so as students become more included in classrooms, classroom teachers are very much like, what are these documents for? They're so disconnected. And so the seed packet was a metaphor to think about, well, what if, IEPs weren't just about kind of communicating what's wrong with a student and what their deficits are, but instead almost like a communication document for a teacher to help them know what the students need to grow. And so it's moving to a strength-based perspective, but also a community-based perspective. So it's not just about a document that says, here's all the things that are wrong and what you need to do to fix them, but instead it's what do you need to do in the garden to support the plant to grow. And then that way it's much more universal to say, if this plant needs this one thing, well, so are many of the other plants. And so it's kind of much more of a blueprint for a classroom, as opposed to an extra plan that you have to follow. And so, so it's personalized, it's strengths-based, it's inclusive, but the audience is the gardener, right? But also to give students a real big voice within that, because they're the ones doing the growing. So that's where we started.
So you were talking, so you couldn't read, but I was listening and reading. And Tamara wrote that she started making seed packets for all her preschool students. She says she cries through all of them, loves them, lots of.
I love it so much.
But I felt a lot of heart emojis. So that's where we've been. And Jamie just put, this is about sharing what someone needs to learn, grow, and be successful.
That's it.
That is it. So with
Is that not the goal? That's the goal.
For real. Now, this is where we're going with this. Who's your favorite historical figure, Shelley?
Me?
Is it potentially this gentleman?
Oh, well, I mean, maybe non-example.
Okay, so this is your favorite non-example of a historical figure.
Well, I'm going to tell you, actually, I'm going to tell you a little story about Napoleon today.
Okay.
Because, our whole session here in our series is about universal design for learning. And there's certain kind of strategies or elements of UDL that have really impacted not just my teaching, but my understanding of the world. And so there's two specific elements that I'm going to share with you that had a high impact. And the first one was Napoleon helped me to learn it. And it also helped me to see, I know, shocking, right?
It also helped me to also help you to realize that when you have a pocket, you don't need to just shove your hand in the middle of your shirt.
I'm just wow, he unbuttoned to do that.
He did two unbuttons.
And so I'm thinking to myself, because all the other thing is that I also learned from Napoleon that, I'm going to tell you this story in a second, that, UDL very much connects with other frameworks that we're familiar with. They don't have to all be different initiatives. So here's my Napoleon story that helped me understand how to be a better teacher, how to be a better UDLer, how to meet the needs of more kids, but also how to plan family dinner. Okay, you ready for this?
I'm so ready.
Here we go. So we're going to go back in time. Okay, so back in time, I'm school-based. I'm a classroom teacher and a support teacher at a high school, grades 8 to 12, okay? And I have two roles in my position. The first one is I'm a support teacher that works with classroom teachers to support students with intellectual disabilities in the classroom. So that's my inclusive role. But I also taught one block of Math 8. Okay, so for this story, I'm going to put on my Math 8 hat. Now, during this time, I'm doing my master's and I'm learning about curriculum. And I'm learning about all these curricular design frameworks. And one of them was UDL and backwards design and differentiated instruction, all of these initiatives that we hear about, right? And one that I really liked was backwards design because it has a catchy slogan. Do you remember? Design with the end in mind. It's like a habit of a highly effective person. You can find it in the book. So, this goes way beyond just curriculum. So I'm thinking to myself, what's the destination in my math class? And up until that point, my destination was a unit test. I was part of a very structured math department that said at the end of every unit, we do a unit test. And this is when you teach this, and this is when you teach this. And so I'm learning all these frameworks, and I'm these don't actually align to the structure. This very rigid structure doesn't align to anything that I'm learning about because it's not responsive at all. So I decided to go rogue, which you may have to do. Okay. So I'm designing my unit and I'm what's my destination? My math unit. And so I'm okay. Fractions. We are multiplying and dividing fractions. Where are we going? Why are we learning this? Where are we going? And I'm usually it's a unit test, but I'm trying to spice things up a bit. So I'm I got it. We're going to bake. We are going to bake. We are going to double and half recipes. Right? What a great destination. And you know what, Katie, at work, they were engaged.
Can you remind me of the standard?
Well, interesting. Put it in your pocket, Katie Novak, because this is what happened.
Okay.
So I think the destination, or you could put it in your vest. I think the destination is the baking. That's what I was thinking. So I thought that I understood. And I thought that it was working because the kids were engaged. Okay, you with me?
So you were like really focused on the activity.
Yes.
And
So then I
maybe-
go, no, totally, you're so right. So then so I think this is working. I'm like, ooh, baking, my kids love it. I'm doing this for all the units. So I'm trying to take what I learn and apply it to other places. So I go into a social studies, grade 9 social studies class. Now I'm a support teacher and I have my support teacher hat on. And the student that I'm supporting is in this grade 9 social studies class. And I'm like, Linda, the teacher, what's your next unit? She's like, Napoleon. So I'm trying to like pull in what I'm learning about backwards design and being like, why are we learning about Napoleon?
Maybe you could
What's
bake
the
a Napoleon
destination? You could bake a Napoleon cake. Well, Linda looks at me and she says, I don't know. It's chapter 4. And we both look at each other. We're like, that's not a reason. That's not a destination. And then we're like, what is the reason? Why do we learn about Napoleon?
Mm-hmm.
So we looked in the curriculum. We looked in the learning standards. And you would be shocked to know the word Napoleon's nowhere to be found. And I'm like, what are we doing? Why the heck are we learning about Napoleon if Napoleon is not in the learning standards? And then I realized, I was like, oh no, I'm doing
Baking
the same
isn't
thing
either.
as that. My baking is the Napoleon. The baking is not the destination. Napoleon's not the destination. I need to know why I'm baking. I need to know why we are learning about Napoleon. So we Googled, why is it important to learn about Napoleon? And there were some really good reasons, friends. And one of them was that you learn about Napoleon to develop your historical critical thinking and develop criteria for heroism and leadership.
Okay.
But we're just like, but wait, Napoleon doesn't have the monopoly on bad leaders.
Right.
So we pulled in a whole
what
bunch
made
of different
him unique?
examples. And we realized why we were confused is because what we didn't realize is that there's an opposite to backwards design, and that's forwards design.
Okay.
And forwards design is that everyone has to do the same activity. And all of us grew up this way. Everyone has to learn about Napoleon. Everyone has to do baking. Everyone has to do the test. Everyone has to read Shakespeare. And if you can't do that, then we were taught to adapt or modify the task. And the reason why this is super problematic is because what if the task is the barrier? What if the task is the barrier? So backwards design actually wasn't designed to be inclusive. It was designed for deep learning because you really realize that if you can learn in multiple ways, that's more deeper learning than if you just show your learning in the same way multiple times. But it became an equity-based strategy connected to UDL because it also provided multiple pathways to get to the same goal, because backwards design flips these around and says, wait a second, what if everyone meets the same goal? What if the learning standard is the same for everybody? And we can still learn about Napoleon. We can still do baking. We can still, write a 5-paragraph synthesis essay. But guess what? That's not the only pathway. And what's beautiful about this is because if everyone has to meet the same goal, you don't have to adapt and modify. It doesn't affect the integrity of the evaluation. And so you can see how this would impact learners substantially, because we're still holding that high expectation of learning standard, and all we're doing is offering a different pathway. So you can imagine my excitement when I started to learn about UDL, and I'm like, this is UDL. UDL is finding different pathways to get to the top of the hill. And so when I started to kind of realize that all of these frameworks that we learn, they don't have to be isolated. They actually really, really work together to help us focus on everyone meeting the goal. So I had a big learning that day because I learned that baking is not the destination, even though it's fun.
Okay. Yep.
And so this changed everything, Katie Novak.
But it is the destination in a culinary arts class when
if the goal is baking.
Right. When baking the bread is the standard. And I'm with you. I once worked within a school that would have basically a month-old penguins, right?
Right.
Any of you are educators or family members, you can think back to, I loved that pine cone activity in elementary school.
Yeah.
Or it was so fun to go see the Christmas Carol after we read Charles Dickens' The Christmas Carol.
Elf on a Shelf.
Yes, our standards don't have a reading list. And with the penguins, there was a lot of watching Happy Feet and dressing up as penguins and drawing penguins. And then I dared ask, what's with the penguins? And was told the unit is on animal adaptation. I'm like, well, I am not sure if any student who dressed up as a penguin could talk about how animals adapt to their environment.
That's it.
But again, I totally agree that we like fall in love as educators with these activities. And then it's like, but we've always done this. And it's like, but what you're doing doesn't align with the actual outcomes that students need to be successful.
Penguins do not have the monopoly on adaptation.
No, they don't. Although,
just like Napoleon doesn't have the monopoly on bad leaders.
But I mean, with penguins, you do get to make snow cones, which is delightful.
I'm just saying but this is so profound because it even makes you ask questions like, what, like, oh my goodness. Okay, quick story. So it'll take me less than a minute, Katie.
Okay, okay, I got you.
Less than a minute. There was a group that said to me, oh, we have this activity for our grade 7s. Everyone goes kayaking. But now we have a student with a physical disability who can't ride the kayak. What are we going to do? And I'm like, why are you going kayaking? They're like, to build community. I'm like, is there another thing you can do? Like, I think that we get so, exactly like you say, like, well, this is what we've done every year is to go kayaking. And I'm like, you do it so much that we forget why we're doing what we're doing. Right. And if that's not the essence of UDL, if we don't know where we're going, what's the point?
These activities are engaging, they're fun. And
kayaking's great.
More important than making learning fun is making learning worthwhile. Mm-hmm. And to make learning worthwhile and meaningful and purposeful, we have to know what's the destination, what's the thing that all students have to know and do. And then from there, we can certainly say, you know, what are some ways that we can get them there? But again, it can
still be fun.
Right. If your goal is animal adaptation is all about how animals and humans, they adapt to their environment. So it's all about shelter, how we find shelter. It's all about how we find like what we're going to eat and how we're going to survive, right? It's all about all those things. And watching Happy Feet and making snow cones is not the way to make sure that students truly understand how people over time have adapted to their environment. So it's not that we can't have fun, is that the first step of planning isn't like, how are we going to have fun? It's what is it that all students have to know and do, have a right to access opportunities to learn and do. And from there, what are ways they can learn that? What are the materials they might need? How can they show that they have understood this? And certainly you can bring in so many amazing, engaging activities, but the first stop is not, I want to come up with a really fun activity, and then I'm going to try to squeeze it into one of these standards.
No, it changed everything, Katie. Everything I do, it changed. Why am I doing this? What's the goal? That's it.
Okay, Kaz just asked an awesome question, and I love it.
Yeah.
Which is how to explain why no kayaking is happening without the disabled student getting blamed. And what I say is it's not getting rid of the kayaking, it's having lots of options. Yeah. So if we say, we want to make sure that we build community, and there's going to be lots of different really cool options for students. Some will be really involved in art projects, and some might choose to go on a kayaking trip. And there are many ways to build community while providing options. And certainly there are some organizations for whom can make kayaking an adaptive activity. Good. But if we have an activity without really flexible pathways, that we cannot move forward making a choice that's going to be exclusionary. I think that it's also in the flexibility of saying you have many people who would be capable of kayaking who have no desire to be on a boat because fear of water or unable to swim or the mosquitoes. Or so when we say we want to have opportunities to build community, get teachers together and say, okay, what are some things we could offer for a community today so that kids can build relationships, so they can experience something they've never before experienced, and what is necessary for some will be made available to everyone. And I would much rather have a choice to kayak or to do something else, to do nature poetry, than to just be told this is what you're doing to build community. Because I've lost agency before we've started.
Mm-hmm. No, that's it. And so, and I guess like that example, I'm just saying that we lose track. We lose track of why we're doing things when our only reasoning for doing an activity is that's what we've always done.
So I love this here. So that's how we're going to start off. Napoleon Schmoleon. UDL is not about fun. Inclusion is not about activities. It's about every kid can and will work towards grade level standards when they have the conditions they need. So share your thoughts and share like your connections. If you're an educator, you might say, oh my gosh, I remember when I spent 2 weeks making a puppet show and I was so concerned with the quality of the yarn on the puppet heads that I don't think my students ever really learned very much about characterization. Or maybe this is resonating with you as like a family member, a parent, like, why is my child coming home with all these word searches? There's not a standard about word searches. So share with us what you're thinking, and this will allow Shelley and I to take turns and catch up on the chat. But as you have just done a cursory glance at the chat, Shelley, what are you thinking about this whole idea of shifting from activities to standards-based pathways? I'm going to start the timer.
I just think that there is a lot of reasons why we can't shift. There's always going to be reasons why we can't shift, but part of this work is looking at why we can and understanding that if we don't do this, we change the trajectory of students' lives. Like, that's it. Like, if we're not providing opportunities for students to meet learning standards, we change the trajectory of their lives. And I think that if we keep that in mind, like without shifting to these types of inclusive frameworks, kids aren't successful. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons why we can't do this work. We could spend all day complaining about the system and how it doesn't allow us to do this. But part of this work is looking for the one reason why we can. Because we can. Nothing we tell you are you not allowed to do.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever shared my story. I'm going to try to do it in less than a minute. But I was always tracked to the lowest classes of
me too.
And so, basically I was in a romper room, and I will flat out say that our behavior collectively left very much to be desired because no one ever expected anything from us. And we were given a lot of rote worksheets, told we had to stay in our seats. And every year my comments on my report card would be pleasure to have in class, to do better with effort. So it was I was the poster child for whatever. So anyway, I went into my senior year and I met Mrs. Krause, who was an English teacher. And when we talk about providing students with equitable opportunities will actually change the trajectory of their lives, I have lived that myself. That Mrs. Krause took me aside and said, on that diagnostic assessment, that essay that you wrote, it was brilliant. And not only was I not in the college prep class, I was a level below it. So it went romper room. No, it probably went substantially separate special education, then romper room, then college prep, then honors. And she's like, you are capable of being in my honors class. And I was like, oh, I do not think you know who you're talking to, because that's not me. And she's like, I've talked to your parents. You're a great writer. I'm very willing to work with you to get you there. And I will never forget the first day I got to be in an honors class. It's better education, and no one will ever tell me differently.
No, it totally is.
Flexibility, the opportunities, and I was so mad. I'm like, this was happening for 12 years, and I was excluded from it? What? I was so angry because
it's infuriating.
That I was capable of doing those same things. And so when people say, I don't know if providing these additional options could really change a student's life, I will tell you from experience, if I did not have Mrs. Krause my senior year, I would not be here today in front of you.
That's so funny. I have the exact same story. If I didn't have one teacher who saw my skills, I would have gone into a streamed adapted class and would not have gone to university. It's the same story. It's just Katie, I knew we were kindred spirit.
Well, and I didn't even get into college. I got waitlisted from state school, which
yeah.
not getting into state school is like rather impressive. But you know what? I am here and I will always, always fight for all students to have
100%.
access to the best opportunities available. And I was successful because Mrs. Krause helped me to build the skills to become successful. It wasn't because I had fun in her class. Because I had fun in a lot of classes, let me tell you, did not learn at high levels and was not prepared to get into college. But that's all hindsight.
Done.
So let's now dive into UDL in action because I'm going to show you, Shelley.
I can't wait.
I backwards designed an English class.
Yes, you did.
I was a middle school and high school English teacher, and I am so blessed and humbled that I got to work in a school district that was completely inclusionary. And the year that we moved towards co-teaching, they were looking for teachers to pilot accepting all students who had previously been in programs, including a program for autism and a program for language-based learning disabilities and a program for what we called resource room, that's life skills, and a program for SEL or behavior. And they said, we have all of these programs with 2 or 3 or 4 kids in them. And we have so many special educators. We believe that we can push in and have fully inclusive classrooms. We're going to provide you with the professional development you need. I had this brilliant co-teacher, and we were able to make a grade level English classroom fully accessible. And when I say all means all, I mean all.
Oh,
So
actually,
talk about like what is the process then of this backwards design as it relates to our work in universal design for learning. And then I want to show you an example of a lesson that I would start with out of the gate to be inclusive before I incorporated specially designed instruction,
yes.
of which as a co-teacher, my general education, or rather my special education partner, she would do a lot of the work to design specially designed instruction, but I was very capable of delivering that when I had time to co-plan and consult and understand that. But essentially, every single time we would plan a lesson, we would start off with the goal. What really is it that all learners have to know and do? And how do we make that really, really transparent to our learners so that they have opportunities to reflect on like what they already know about it and what they might need to be successful and how can they personalize it to make it engaging? So we spent a lot of time not only on our own work of what is it that all students have to know and do, but letting kids know this is what you're learning and this is why you're learning it. And this is why it's worthwhile. This is why it's valuable. This is the thing that you can transfer and carry with you. And then we would spend a little bit of time doing some explicit framing, some instruction of this is what it is that you're going to know and do. These are the options that you're going to have. And let's get all on the same page to access that really great, direct, interactive instruction. And then we would say to students, now I want you to think about these are the pathways that you have available to you so that you can learn the materials you're going to use and how you're going to share what you know. And so we really got into the habit of what we say in UDL, firm goals and flexible means. It all starts with backwards design. And every day we wanted to really honor our learners by allowing them to self-differentiate their learning and self-differentiate how they were going to share their learning. But it always had to come down to firm goals. So are you ready to dive in and then talk about how you would help me make this even more inclusive by really helping me to see additional pathways, what specific students might need to be successful? Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
So let's hear from everyone to start off with. We are going to write an argument. Everyone's going to write an argument. The standard actually says write, Shelley. So this is not.
We got to write.
We have to produce writing. That's important.
And that's okay.
Yep, everyone can produce writing. Some people will need lots of scaffolding and tools, but we're going to produce writing. And it's going to be really neat because you're going to read or listen to a transcript of a TED Talk. And the gentleman has really serious depression and he makes fun of it. And you're going to get to decide, is that like appropriate? Because he's trying to make it like so we're more likely to talk about the depression we experience. Or is that like really not appropriate? Or maybe sometimes you think it's a little bit, and then sometimes he goes too far. So to start off the class, I would have students walk in. Now, what you're noticing here is there's a couple different representations. So this is called the mood meter. If you look on the right-hand side, you're going to see language that is more positive, more pleasant. We see elated, thrilled, inspired. On the left side, you're going to see less pleasant emotions, but they're not negative emotions, because goodness knows there are times where we should be enraged and it makes sense for us to feel alone. And those are beautiful parts of our human experience. But the other cool thing about the mood meter is the words on the bottom require less energy, and the ones at the top are high energy. So right now I'm feeling pretty positive and like really high energy. I see that emoji, it speaks to me. So if I wanted to get more specific, I could look at those words. But this would just allow me to kind of go through my classroom and check in with every student. How are you doing today? So Shelley, I would love to know how you're feeling today. And you don't have to pick one emotion. So you might say, I'm feeling pretty inspired because I'm here, but to be honest, I'm kind of tired because the little baby love was up last night. And while Shelley's sharing, 30 seconds, let us know with an emoji or in the chat how you're feeling right now, knowing that whatever you're feeling, it's okay. Give yourself permission to feel it.
How do I feel today? Okay, I'm feeling good, feeling optimistic today. I am pretty tired though, because I have a toddler. And so, but I like what you said about, be drawn to the emoji and then choose more specifically. I like that. So that's inspiring me.
Right. So you
connections to other activities.
I love this because I'm looking at people's, the feelings, and we have, tired, inspired, angry, content, chill, worried. And again, we cannot create a culture of toxic positivity in education. There are things that we want to be very, very, grateful for and, express our gratitude. And I love this work. But the reality is there's lots of things in education that should make us angry. And there's lots of education that should make us upset. And we have to respect when parents and teachers and students have those feelings. So I love just seeing the variability of how everyone's doing right now. But again, that is how I would start the class, just getting people connecting and really just thinking about it. They could draw an emoji, they could talk about it, but now we're going to dive in. Now, this is a lesson that requires students to access a grade level text. You do not universally design literacy by only giving easy texts. Now, I want to make a caveat here because we have foundational reading skills, which are from kindergarten to 4th grade, and then we have reading comprehension skills from kindergarten to 12th grade. And you cannot exclude students from accessing and comprehending grade level text when they are not decoding at a grade level. So as a 10th grade teacher, it is my job to ensure that students have access to complex text at their grade level. It does not say how much of it they have to read. It does not say that they have to read it by themselves. I just want to make sure that there's access. So I've given students opportunities to think about different emotions, and then I would present that we are going to access a text, and it's going to have us think about, is it okay to make fun of depression? There is no wrong answer. That's the beautiful thing about writing an argument. Now, these options and choices would be provided to all students. So this is from a curriculum called Common Lit, and students could either access this by having a hard copy of it, or they could access it electronically. It does have a read aloud. You can change the font. It does change to Spanish. I always had one of my classroom jobs be the classroom reader, because sometimes it's great to have really strong oral fluency as a model. So, maybe Shelley is my student, hey, for the next 2 weeks, if anyone chose to listen to text, would you be willing to be a classroom reader for me? And what's so fascinating about this is a TED Talk, of which is available in 33 languages already.
There you go.
So I have not read an IEP yet. I have not looked at SDI yet, to be inclusive, if I want all students to comprehend this text, I recognize I have many students who are multilingual. I have many students who are not decoding at grade level yet. I may have students with visual impairment. If I just hand out the printed copy to everyone and say, read, I have excluded a heck of a lot of kids who deserve.
And I think it's like really key to notice here that like the learning standard in this activity is not decoding.
Correct.
Right.
It's
and I think that's really
comprehending
important.
text so that you can
comprehending
write an opinion or an argument. So imagine the classroom, right? Is we've reflected on today, we're all going to understand this text, and then we're all going to produce writing about this text. And all of us experience all these different emotions. And so based on your own experiences, you're going to say, I don't think it was very nice that he made fun of his depression. Or maybe you said, I like that he did it because we're more comfortable talking about things that make us laugh. So all of these options, may I note, would be available every day. Anytime there's a text in my classroom, these are your options. So I have some students who will access the hard copy, others who will want a device so they can read or they can listen or they can translate. I have other students who might come around a projector. I could play the TED Talk in English. Others can go on their own devices. This classroom right now is allowing students to self-differentiate. That was one of the questions in the chat. Said like, can you talk more about self-differentiation? I say to students, the goal here is that you understand what happened in this transcript so that you can have an opinion about it. So what's the best way for you today, depending on how tired you are, depending on your background information, your mood, what's the best way for you to get this information? Now,
and can I just say, like, everything you've done here, the learning standard has not been compromised at all. None of this is an adaptation or a modification.
Correct.
And so I think that part of kind of the misunderstanding around adaptation and self-differentiation is that we're used to telling kids, you get this, you get this, you get this, you get this, because that's your adaptation. No. Self-differentiation means we figure out what the kids need, have the options available to everyone so that the students can decide what they need. And so like, I love that that question came up around self-differentiation because we were taught to do the opposite.
Yes, it is. It's so true. But like people will go, but you have some kids who can decode already. It's irrelevant. The goal here is comprehending text so that I can assess a written product. And you can't cite evidence from something that you don't comprehend. And therefore, let's give everyone the best opportunity to comprehend it. What you also notice here is I'm free. I'm not reading out loud to a group. So I am walking around. I'm giving feedback. I'm saying, talk to me about what you chose and why. Oh, like what technology tool are you using here? This is so great. I'm walking around. I'm checking in. Now, we know that the working memory of students is not super fantastic, nor are our own working memories. So I would say to students, before you get into reading or listening or a combination, I would have a lot of students who would like to have it on their iPad and they would like to have someone read it out loud. So you can make your own adventure. But what I would tell them is, remember, you have to know when he is trying to be funny so that you can say if he is being funny or not. So if you're reading this alone, if you're reading this with a small group, it doesn't matter. What do you feel like is going to be the best way for you to understand this? You can highlight every time that you feel like he's trying to make a joke. It's a really good scaffold to watch the TED Talk or to look at the audio transcript because it will actually tell you in brackets when people are laughing, which is a really good scaffold because humor is so generational and so incredibly cultural. Now, it might be better for students to, as they're listening, just kind of write down like a quick thing to remember. I would also have a graphic organizer ready that would, what is the humor? And then they could put a check mark later. Was that funny? Was that inappropriate? And then I could help them see, well, you thought some of them were funny, but you thought some of them were inappropriate. Again, as students are reading, I want them actively reading. They can fill out graphic organize together. They can pause through a read aloud. They can go back to the TED Talk. This was every day. So we're walking around and everyone is kind of making their notes. And this allows me to see if they are identifying humor correctly, which is an informal formative assessment. So I want to make sure that students are on the right track before we go into the writing process. Now, the writing process recognizes that some students are going to comprehend that text. They're going to have their notes. They're going to be ready to go. They can get started. Go fly away, sweet little bird. Now, other students are going to want to spend more time. Maybe if we're co-teaching, we set up a station to help fill out the graphic organizer together, or we do like a parallel teaching where one person does a graphic organizer and one person answers questions. If it's just me, I would say, let's take a little bit of time here. And for those of you who want to fill out the graphic organizer and have me check it, please come over. If you have students who speak the same language, go talk about it in your language. Make sure that you're kind of on the same page. You understand the task. I really embrace translanguaging. Ask me questions, whatever you need so you feel ready. But ultimately, the writing production is all about what do you need to do to produce something which will allow me to have writing conferences to help you get to your next level. So this right here is not going to be assessed as far as a mark or a score, but I'm going to say you have all comprehended it. You all have some idea of where he tried to be funny. Some students might have lots of different evidence to say this joke, this joke, this joke. The standard does not say you must have 3 pieces of evidence to support your argument. It says you're going to write an argument. So they can either write it by hand, they can type a draft in their notebook. I am not scared of ChatGPT because I've already seen their notes and connected with every student. I know what their opinions are, and if they need support to help to craft that, I think that's brilliant. They can use all augmentative communication, every student in that room. I always encourage them to have a snack if that was necessary, to put in an earbud if that was helpful. But again, always keeping this is the goal. And I'm just going around with my co-teacher and we're supporting and we're sitting down and we're having writing conferences. So this allows students to self-differentiate the assessment. Now, the non-negotiables was accessing the grade level text. They all did. Citing evidence, which they could do using lots of different note-taking strategies, and producing writing. I did not say it must be 10 lines of text. You must use 15 quotes. I want you to produce the answer to this question, and I'll meet you where you are, and I will bring you closer to those grade level expectations by going through exemplars, by partnering and having peer review. But what you'll notice is all of this is before I start pulling small groups. So I want to really stress here that there are absolutely times where we need to be responsive to student work and pull small groups. So we started, Shelley said, what is it that all students have to know and do? Backwards design. Based on the variability of the kids that I serve, what might prevent them from doing that? Multilingual students, inability to decode, visual impairment. What might prevent students from producing writing? Struggle to organize it. There's a graphic organizer. Struggle to come up with it independently. There's an option for collaboration. I'm walking around, I'm giving feedback. But ultimately, students are going to produce something. And then I am going to put them in groups based on what they need for feedback. So I might pull 4 students and say, I am meeting with all of you because your writing would be so much stronger if your organization was a little bit more explicit. It's not really clear what you're agreeing with and what you're not agreeing with. So I want to sit with all of you. We're all going to fill out a graphic organizer again together. We're going to help each other through, right? And what we want to do is make sure that we're not starting off expecting some students to not access. That's so deficit-based. So when you're starting the lesson being like, these are my non-readers, I'm going to give them an audio. We do not want to differentiate instruction at that point. We're doing it to be responsive based on data because we want to make sure that we're providing students with what they need to move to the next level. So, Shelley, this is your question. How did that lesson, again, we haven't even talked about SDI yet, specially designed instruction. This is just inclusive, universally backwards design. I knew what my goals were. I was super clear about them. I would stand by that. I used that lesson with fidelity to anyone who wanted to walk in. But why is it so important that we stress the firm goal before we start thinking about the flexible means? And everyone else, let us know your answers as well while Shelley gives her answer for 2 minutes.
You know, when you were talking about like bringing kids together into small groups, like there's such a misunderstanding that, good universally designed tier 1 instruction means that we can't have small groups again. And, and for so long it's been called pull out. And I'm like, just because we're moving away from pull out doesn't mean you can't have small groupings, but it really makes us really question, well, what's the goal of the grouping? And so always come back to that. It's not about abilities. It's always about the goals. And so why are we bringing students together? Why are we conferencing together? And always knowing that why, because there's such a misunderstanding that that this tier 1 is going to be the magic bullet for all kids. Some kids might need more support, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that we're eliminating small groups and conferencing with individual students. And so I think that, and I love how you started it, I am meeting with you for today because it doesn't have to be a secret. And that flexibility of those small groups. I love, someone said once, you always know it's a good group when kids never pick up the pattern. You know what I mean? Because they're working with groups all the time in different ways and different goals and different, be able to work with each other. And so I think that, I love how you phrase that, because that's exactly it. But the part that I think is key is that small group you were meeting with, Katie, didn't replace the tier 1 instruction. Right. So if they do receive small group support, it's in addition to, it can't be replaced. And, it's like that. It's like the cake story we talk about.
So I'm looking right now at the questions. We'll do a couple questions here. First one, do you have a template for the seed packet idea?
I do actually. I can, let me find that and I'll post it in the.
Okay, perfect. Well,
you keep talking.
Okay. The next is, I'm not familiar with this organization, but Shelley, do we all ever collaborate with Autism Level Up? Apparently they have energy regulator tools.
I'm always open to organizations and programs. I think I get worried when we talk about regulator tools, and I worry that they get mixed up with compliance tools. And so I haven't worked specifically with that organization, but that would be my only disclaimer, is make sure that it's not just about tools to help people comply, because that's never the goal.
Tell me more. I feel like other people are going to want you to expand on that.
Well, I think we've gone down a long, dark hole about self-regulation. That it is this, self-regulation is, here's your tools so that you can sit and listen to me, tell you what to do, and you can behave, and you can do all these things, and that you have to be calm to learn. And that's actually just not true. You don't always have to be calm to learn. And so it's become a lot of compliance-based programs and strategies and tools that have actually increased behavior and anxiety with students, because it's actually reduced the amount of room and flexibility that students have. And so I think that it's really, anytime I see that word regulation, my hairs on my neck go up, because when we talk about regulation, this is what it means. Do students know the goal? Do they know what they need to meet the goal? How do they know when they've met the goal? And do they know what the next step is? And nowhere in there does it say they have to sit quietly on their hands and look forward and not talk.
Eyes and knees on me.
I cannot stress enough how misunderstood regulation is. And I don't want to scapegoat this particular organization, but it is a very important question to ask. What do you think regulation means?
Okay,
it doesn't mean.
Oh, sorry.
It doesn't mean do what I say.
Okay, we got some preach, but I do want to, Stacy asked a question and it's super pertinent right now.
Yeah.
So this is great, but when do your 10th graders get decoding? Thank you for asking that question, Stacy.
Yes, it's a great question.
That is what a multi-tiered system of support is that some students need supplemental reading.
Yes.
Orton Gillingham, Wilson,
yes,
Bell, Seeing Stars, whatever it happens to be, right? And what often happens is they're getting the decoding instead of the access to grade level text, and they will never catch up. They'll never catch up. So my daughter is in 6th grade, brilliant comprehension, has really significant dyslexia, decoding ability closer to 1st grade in 6th grade. But when sister listens to I'll have audiobooks on in my office, not gross content, but she'll be like, what? Why are they fighting? I'm like, oh my, get out, stop listening. But her comprehension is excellent. She's not decoding. So she has a reading class every single day. She used Wilson. We're making really tremendous progress. It's wonderful. And so any student who is not decoding by the end of 4th grade, which is when the foundational reading standards are up, needs a supplemental reading class. Now you start going, we don't have the staffing for that. We don't have the schedule to get an extra block. We don't have the curriculum for that. You need a plan to get it, because having a student do a Wilson in lieu of having this amazing access to grade level text is going to be really problematic and is not going to set them up for success. So that's
it creates a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the best example of that? I actually realized this like recently because, I have a daughter, she's 2. And I think, I don't know, Katie, you probably read to your kids when they were babies.
Oh, I still do. I love it.
It hit me when I was doing this. I'm reading to my daughter every night. I read to her every night. And I realized, I'm like, why am I doing this? She's not going to decode back. But it's because we are exposing her and giving her the opportunity to understand the behaviors of reading and comprehension and literacy. And so I think like that in supplement of is really important, because kids can comprehend at a higher rate of understanding than they can express it. And so, if I can read to my 2-day-old baby, then we have to make sure that our kids who can't decode at a grade 10 level aren't missing instruction. Because imagine if they don't have access to that, how that's going to impact their readiness moving forward. So whenever you think, they can't read, so they still have to be exposed to the behaviors and the texts and the resources that anyone would, or we are putting a barrier into place. And so but this is exactly it. So what are the additional levels then and layers to support students when they do need, in addition to that great tier 1 universal instruction?
All right. So wonderful. I have now taken 6 minutes of your time on our schedule.
That's okay. I can go fast.
Okay. No, we'll just take it out of the Q&A because we supplemented right now with a little Q&A. So now I'm so excited. You know my lesson, right?
Yeah, totally.
You're going to talk about, that was just first best instruction. Now, how do I recognize what really are the needs of the students who are co-serving, so that I can create an environment and use strategies that would better support all of our students?
And I think that what I love about this is that when we're talking about inclusive design, can you go back for 1 second?
Oh, yeah.
When we're talking about inclusive design, it's like sandwich, right? We're sandwiching our kids with supports from both sides. So we need our curriculum to be really flexible and universally designed. But we also have to look at individual needs and say, okay, so in addition to that curricular design, what are some additional needs that we can supplement to sandwich those kids with support? You can have the most universally designed classroom in the world in terms of curriculum, but if we're not also looking at individual needs, we're going to have kids that fall through the cracks. Just like we can have all the supports and strategies for needs all we want, but if we don't have a really good, flexibly and universally designed curriculum, kids are going to fall through the cracks. So this requires the working together of both sides of a sandwich. Me and Katie are the sandwich. Here's the problem. If you look historically at how we have met students' needs, first of all, we don't look at their needs. We have historically looked at their disabilities. Historically, students have had to qualify for supports. Now, funny story, when I was teaching in New York, I was a grade 4 support teacher, co-teaching with a grade 4 classroom teacher. And so we were together. And so you can imagine the shock on my face when my kids were getting pulled out. I'm like, where are you going? I'm here. I'm the special education teacher. I'm here. Where are you going? And so me and my co-teacher, we would laugh all the time. We'd be like, they must be going to eat from the magic cupcake that's going to fix them. Because I'm like, where are you going?
I want the magic cupcake.
I want this magic cupcake. So now you can switch the slide. So this became a big joke because basically all these kids that qualify had to go eat from these magical cupcakes. So if they need decoding, they go eat from the decoding cupcake. They need SLP support, they go to the SLP cupcake. We have English language learning cupcake. Oh my goodness, we have sensory room cupcakes popping up all over the place. Behavior cupcakes, regulation cupcakes. All over the place. Okay, when I first started,
I think that we both probably need regulation cupcakes.
Only if. But when I first started teaching, we had indigenous cupcakes and all the indigenous students went to go eat from the magic indigenous cultural cupcake. And I'm like, ridiculous, because here's what happens is, as our classrooms get more diverse, which is great, the demand for the cupcakes increases. It also relies on failure. Like, how do you know who needs to eat from the magical cupcakes? Well, they're not doing well. So it relies on failure. The demand goes up. Resources never increase with demand. So the cupcakes turn into one-bite brownies. Then we have kids with a lot of needs who eat all the cupcakes. And it leaves our classroom teachers being like, oh my goodness, there's nothing left for my class. There's no resources left for my class. I have to go spend my own money and my own time, go to the grocery store, buy my own ingredients. I don't have a recipe. I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to do the best that I can. And this is why people hate inclusion. And so we're super frustrated. And so then we advocate, we need more cupcakes. Our needs of our kids are, we need more cupcakes, and people rant and rave and strike. We need more cupcakes. But I mean, like, I'm sitting back here and I'm like, hey, y'all, maybe there's a better way to use the batter. Like, has anyone asked if there's a better way to use the batter? So my friends, there is a better way to use the batter. Okay. And that's really moving away from this deficit-based magic cupcake model too.
Oh my gosh, but I have to tell you something that just came in the chat that I love. It said, I have to say how much I love that you used cupcakes, because they're made to look really fancy and appealing, but they're lacking in nutrition and content.
I'm just saying, and they just put on extra icing, and you can't eat all that icing. You're gonna have a sugar crash. All I'm saying, you ready?
I'm ready.
How do you use the batter better?
Tell me when to press.
Go. The layered cake of support love, my friends. So this is an inclusive model that says, wait a second, let's look at the needs.
Hold on, I'm going back.
It's okay. Let's look at the needs of a whole class, not their disabilities, not their deficits. Look at the needs, anticipate the needs of our class. We know who the kids are. We collect data till we're purple. We know who the kids are. Let's anticipate those needs. And we're going to design, if one kid is navigating trauma, it's going to hurt no one to make a trauma cake. Everyone's going to get a slice of that cake.
I'll get a slice of that cake.
You have a student who's Indigenous. Indigenous teaching and pedagogy is not going to harm anyone. That's going to be a part of that whole cake, right? Like, this is thinking about, if one kid needs it, let's make it in a cake that we serve to the whole community. And you know what? When I first heard Katie do this example, I was just like, you know what? She has not only done universal design for learning in the example, but she's also anticipated a lot of needs of kids, like anxiety and looking at, literacy, like anticipating a lot of the needs that kids have already to make the base of that cake really, really strong, okay? But some kids might need more. And so really, when we're looking at this cake, the first thing I want you to think of is everybody gets a slice of that cake. You don't have to prove that you need it. It's not going to harm anyone. And Katie did that when she was like, all of these are options for everybody. All of them. You choose, you self-differentiate. That's because everybody has access to all the layers. Friends, the layered cake of love is, it's RTI. That's what it is. Now, I like RTI as an intervention and an instructional model, because it's not just waiting for intervention. This is at the instructional level, how are we meeting all kids' needs? And then how do we intervene when they need more support? But it's not divide and conquer. It's not just putting cupcakes on a tiered tray. This is about how do we meet the needs of the whole class. Okay, what's the next slide? So we're gonna, can you go to the next slide now? I forget what's next. Here we go. So go back. So thinking about this, we can actually use this to anticipate some of our planning in terms of needs. Okay, so if you know what kind of needs your kids are having and are like, okay, so maybe that Tier 1 universal instruction, there's still kids who still need a little bit more, right? So let's anticipate this. And so when I think about the different types of needs in RTI, a good way how I think about it is like universal, we're just going to do it for everybody. Like, think of a GPS device. Every GPS device has a map. If it doesn't have a map, it's not a GPS device. And then there's some ports that are like, they're still available to everyone, but they're more of a choice, right? So on a GPS device, the voice is a choice. You can decide if you need it or not. I hate the voice. It interrupts my podcasts, right? So that's going to be still available to everyone. And Katie does this a lot. And then there's some individualized supports that are on top of that, which is like specific to the person. So on a GPS device, my address book is designed specifically for me. My address book on Bowen Island is not going to be useful to Katie, just like Katie's address book in Massachusetts, it's not going to be useful to me, right? It's individualized. You can also have an individualized address book, but it's specifically designed for the person. And so I was trying to anticipate a need that a lot of us are navigating right now. And so I chose, next slide. I chose anxiety. Oh, next slide again. So this is a real life classroom. This is a kindergarten classroom that are navigating anxiety. There are 2 or 3 students that we have in mind. Katie has done an incredible job laying the foundation and, decreasing the crisis. Mm-hmm. And we have a couple of students that, still are really struggling. And so we're thinking, how do we add on layers to their cake so that not instead of the instruction, but in addition to, we're working together to say, okay, what else can we do? Some of these are already embedded, and maybe Katie's just like, you know what, I tried this. Was there anything else I could try that would just be good for everybody, right? Maybe there's some things that I can offer as a choice. Maybe there's some individualized tools or strategies or actions that we can do. And so we actually came together as a team and brainstormed and said, what's your tried and true, test, work anxiety for the little ones? And you know what? It was incredible because we talked to educational assistants, paras, we talked to parents, we talked to the students and said, what helps you manage when your feelings get really big and you have that anxiety? Some of these were from the school counselor. Some of these were from the teacher. Some of these were from the support teacher, right? But you can start to see, depending on the class, some of these might be universal. Some of them might be targeted. What was really cool, though, is that we asked the student, this little 5-year-old, what would help you? Because he was barely getting in the door. He missed his family so much, little guys. And so we're just like, hey, what do you think you need? He said, oh man, can I just carry a picture of my family in my pocket? We're like, oh my goodness, we taught everybody. If you are feeling like you miss your family or you miss, you bring a picture to school, a little picture, we will laminate it. You can put it in your desk, you can put it in your pocket. And you know what? Other kids actually took advantage of that. And that's individualized because this kid's family is not going to be useful to anyone else's family. One kid brought a picture of their puppy, right? And so that was actually a support determined from the student. Another example was the mom was like, hey, so here's the thing. Our neighbor is the school librarian and her and my son have a really good relationship. Can we offer it as a choice for him to just have a check-in first thing in the morning with our neighbor who they love? And he can decide when he needs it. And so we talked to the librarian that was specifically designed for him because they had that really special relationship. And so that the step in the door wasn't so big, right? That was designed specifically for him. That was in addition to all of the other things that were also happening in the classroom, in the small groups, working with the kids. Everyone was learning strategies. And, and this is very different than I have a student with autism or I have a student with anxiety who's going to an anxiety management group once a week with other kids who are navigating anxiety so they can talk about anxiety and figure out how they're going to move past their anxiety. And then nothing else happens in the classroom because they're totally separate. This relies on the layered approach of how do these things work together? What can a classroom teacher do to pull in supports for everyone? What can a small group do to add on supports to that general instruction for everybody? And whether this is anxiety or literacy or behavior or social skills, the more layered they are into a foundational community, the more effect they're going to have on individual kids who have that. And the more we divide and conquer, the less transference, the less relevancy it's going to have. And so this isn't specifically about curriculum, but it works together with the curricular plan, especially those kids who need a little bit more. And if you look at this, Katie's pulled in a lot of these things, and this is what it is. It's working with teachers to say, what can we pull in? It's what we're doing with everybody, because once you pull it in with everyone, you're going to meet the needs of multiple kids at one time. But this is not a disability plan. This is a needs-based plan. And so you're going to get to more kids than just the one kid who has qualified for anxiety based on a deficit-based norm referenced assessment. very, very important that we're zooming out and making this a community plan with options to go deeper and more support for individual students if they need it. Katie, it's just so possible.
It is so possible. And one of the things I know that in Washington, the idea of response to intervention is encompassed within a multi-tiered system.
Yes.
Which is also looking at exactly what you're talking about here. Like, how do we build the competency of educators so that they have the skill set to do this work? And that requires that we offer really great professional learning, have common planning between people with very different areas of expertise, things like educator evaluation, professional learning communities. We have to make sure that we're building the capacity of all educators so they feel prepared to do this work. They feel prepared to work together. But then there's also a lot of other things like our schedule and access to really high quality instructional materials and technology. And just the shared responsibility for shifting systems to offer this requires that we think differently about how we collaborate with families and the communities. And just like we say, every single student can be wildly successful when we get the conditions right, the same is true of teachers.
Absolutely.
Teachers get really high quality professional learning when they have opportunities to collaborate with one another in really meaningful ways, when they're constantly getting feedback on how to better serve students. Teachers increase their collective efficacy and students learn at much higher levels while being included. So in some ways, when we look at, we want to provide these tiers of support, when we zoom back, it's like, but what would we need to do differently in the system so that we could provide? We need more time to plan.
You said something once that I loved, and I think it was in this session last time when we were working in California, but you said, like, what would it mean to do a resource inventory? To look at, like, how are resources currently being used, and are they actually counteractive to this approach? How do we actually like zoom out even further and just be like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And where's the flexibility to, use resources in different ways instead of trying to make things work in boxes that actually are preventing this work from happening?
Yeah, so somebody asked in the chat, like, I'm struggling with how to do tier 3, right? So one of the questions is, can you share a structure to provide tier 3? I think we can get tier 1, responsive, flexible grouping for tier 2, struggling to find time and resources. So I can speak to my own child, who this is a great example because I'm like listening to what you're saying. So my daughter is in a school that has a schedule where every day there's an additional block of time. It's called the WIN block.
Oh, what I need.
But like it could be the intervention block or tiger time or plus block. But essentially it is a time where additional supports can be provided without students like missing out on first best instruction.
And everybody has it, right?
Correct.
I love that. Yeah.
So like some teachers will offer like additional help. Sometimes people will proctor makeup exams for kids who missed work. There's some times for like, enrichment. And so different schools definitely do this, but like every kid goes somewhere and then they kind of like move around based on data. Anywho, so my daughter is fully included. Her math and ELA class are co-taught. So you have a general education teacher, the license to teach math or ELA, and then also a special education teacher. They're together. That allows for co-planning. It allows for co-teaching using many different approaches. Like, we can use, it makes sense to do alternative teaching here, or one teach, one support, or station rotation. All of that is happening. And then she also needs Wilson reading. And so she gets that 4 days a week for WIN. So in that additional block of time, so she still gets her music, she still gets her PE, right. She's not missing out on anything that her peers get. Some people will say, yeah, but like, let's say that there's extra help during that WIN block. She doesn't get that. And it's like, okay, that is true that she doesn't get that opportunity, but she doesn't lose access to any of the tier 1 standards-based instruction.
Well, and if you look at like what families are more likely able to provide, supporting help around an assignment is so much more possible than accessing Wilson reading program at home after school. Do you know what I mean? So like thinking about, how are we using resources? I like what you said. I think too, when I was doing my co-teaching with my teacher, one would take the lead and I would often be the support person. And once that mini lesson was done, like during the work time, that's when I would do my check-ins. And sometimes that, essential individualized support was was 5 minutes, right? And so I think like sometimes we think it has to be a separate program, and sometimes it is, but like the key is, it can't be during instruction, but can it be, during work time when you're bringing together needs-based groups or having those conferences and kind of one-to-one conversations? I think that there's absolutely space for that. It has to be supplemental. And so what does that mean and what does that look like?
So I'm looking at the chat and, one of the things says, what if students have the choice for something like win time, but do not do it?
Often they have to enroll though, don't they?
Right. As classroom educators, like we want to provide students with options and choices so that can learn at high levels. If you're making choices where you're not learning at high levels, then you're going to be redirected. We have to be responsive to student needs. In many of the districts that I've worked with, it's not necessarily like there might be one day a week that's optional, but a lot of the times you're enrolled in something for like 4 to 6 weeks. And before that enrollment is open, you're assigned to a math intervention, an ELA intervention, a learning center for special education, a social skills group. And like that's assigned first in the student management system. And then for the students who remain, they don't have any really significant needs to be addressed. And so at that point, the options and choices are, there's no like, oh, you haven't made a good choice for your learning, because we're using data to determine entry and exit criteria for a lot of them. The other thing is noted that, the importance of co-teaching. I only taught one co-teaching section and I taught 3 other classrooms totally by myself.
Right.
But having the opportunity to co-plan with a special education teacher every single day allowed me to understand how to teach those other 3 independently. So I did have one co-taught section, but I taught 4 classes a day as a 7th grade English teacher or, a high school English teacher. And so it wasn't so much that I needed the co-teaching in every section, but I absolutely needed to access the co-planning to understand, I want to make sure I'm implementing this specially designed instruction correctly. I want to make sure that we're on the same page about, I tried this the last couple of weeks, we're not seeing growth. What do I need to do differently? That was really important.
And I think that's a key, because if you don't have a co-teacher, it can sometimes, they can drift apart. And what ends up happening is, it's the classroom teacher show and the special education show, but the more disconnected it is and it becomes less layered. And then those interventions will, if they're disconnected, they're not going to have as big of an impact. And so even if you don't have that co-teacher, that connection and that co-plan to say, hey, this student is receiving this intervention, what can I pull in to my classroom at the tier 1 level? Because it's going to make a difference to more than just that one student. And that's that cake idea. WIN is absolutely good for all levels. 100%. Because that, my friends, is self-regulation. Knowing what you need, that is the self-regulation I'd be looking for in a program.
Yeah, Alicia, there's a lot of names for it. Like if your mascot's the tiger, it's like tiger time. Now what I would tell you is, so my daughter, tier 1, ELA, math, science, social studies, music, PE, library, all the things. She then gets Wilson reading 4 times a week. She gets her social skills group 1 time a week. Only thing left on the C grid was speech and language 1 times 15 for pragmatic language. They're like, okay, we've run out of time. What are we pulling her out of? I'm like, nothing. You're not pulling her out of anything. And I was like, I'll stay put. If you're a family member right now who has kids who have support needs, you're like, stay put, claws, baby. So they're like, well, we could push in. And I was like, that actually makes way more sense.
Sounds great. Yeah.
How do you work on pragmatic language when there's no one to talk to? So this is what happens, right? You say to my daughter, Aylin, what would you do if someone grabs something out of your hand? I would say, that was not respectful. Please give it back to me. What would she actually do when someone pulls something out of her hands? I mean, get real imaginative, because it would be amazing.
High elbow.
Yeah, true. Right. It's amazing. So I'm like, wouldn't it be so much more beneficial to work towards pragmatic language goals? Yeah. So like once a week when she's coming in during ELA, the ELA teacher could say, oh, we'll do collaborative work at that time. And that way you can come in, sit with a group and just work. Yeah. No one has any idea that speech and language pathologist is there for my daughter, right? But that's a service that I was like, yes, I think that's a great idea. So she is not pulled from anything. And again, is killing it, is loving life, but there's a lot of structural support that's provided to make that happen. Because if you just change the schedule, but there's no co-planning time or people haven't had professional learning, like the extra time isn't going to do anything if you're not using it in a really valuable way.
Jessica has a great question. Can I share this with her? Can I share this? She says, what if students aren't making the choices that they need? And actually, I didn't get to this, and so I want to point it out. This is exactly for Jessica. So she says, what if a student needs an audiobook, but they don't choose it? Okay, so what often happens when kids aren't choosing the supports that they need, it's because it's stigmatized or they don't know how to use it. And 2 ways to reduce those barriers is by once you've determined what your supports and strategies are for a specific need, is to teach them. So this right here on the screen right now, this is a classroom support plan where you can prioritize and target needs of individual students, but then determine, okay, how are we using resources to make these supports and strategies as universal as possible? Okay, next slide. So this is an example of one that we did. Oh, next slide. For a Math 9 class, okay? And so we're just like, okay, so we have some students who have some additional needs. What can we do at the universal level that's just going to benefit everybody? How are we going to add on support? And so one example is if you have students who are struggling with executive functioning, they sometimes get very overwhelmed and before they shut down, they need an out. And so a really great strategy to teach all kids is, next slide, is taking a 2-minute break. Okay, so this kind of gets to the stigmatized idea. So taking a 2-minute break is a strategy that's useful for many different needs, okay? It's one of the best strategies you could take. If you just tell kids, go take a 2-minute break, or if you tell a certain kid, you're allowed to take a 2-minute break, they're not gonna take the 2-minute break because they don't wanna be singled out. And so what this class did is they made it universal, so the kids didn't even know that was designed for them. Okay, so they taught everyone. So every week, students got to vote on they use the bowling ball as the metaphor. So kids wrote down on the bowling balls what supports they need to get knocked down. We added some based on the classroom support plan. And then every Friday, students voted on which shot they wanted to learn. Okay, so say it's audiobooks. Say it's 2-minute breaks. Some of these say, I need to move. One of them says, positive encouragement from others. What does that mean? So this is how we taught. We taught all of the supports and strategies the exact same way. The next slide shows you. So we did like a 10-minute lesson. The support teacher came in and co-taught this with the classroom teacher with the same friend. Next slide there, Katie. And so we co-constructed criteria. What is a 2-minute break? Why is it useful? How do I use it as a tool or an action? So just substitute this for audiobook, right? If kids aren't using it, they don't know how to use it, or they don't want it to be stigmatized. If everyone's learning how to use it and also getting a chance to try it out and practice it, they came back after 1 or 2 weeks of practice. The novelty also wears off, right? Everyone wants to try the audiobook. Everyone wants to take a 2-minute break. We built the parameters, and then kids reflected on, okay, is this a support I need? How do I know I need it? When do I need it? And that right there, that's self-regulation, okay? To be like, here are the tools that I have access to. I know how to use them. I know when to use them. And because they're available to everyone and everyone knows how to use them, kids are going to choose them if they need them. And often what happens is after a couple of weeks, the novelty wears off. I walked into a 4th grade classroom once, and every kid was sitting on a yoga ball. Could you imagine? All their heads were like this. And I walk in, I'm like, what's going on? They're like, universal design for learning. Everyone gets a yoga ball. I'm like, this is not UDL. This is chaos. You're going to get concussions. There's one kid that's just like, woo, like this. And I'm like, not everybody needs a yoga ball. Teach everyone how to use a yoga ball. Start with 3. Teach everyone how to use it. Everyone's going to want to try it. We're going to take turns. We're going to figure out when to use them, when it's okay. How do we know it's not working for us? Usually if our body's on the floor. So maybe this isn't a strategy for you, and that's okay. Get the novelty out of the way. After about 6 weeks, you're going to notice you're right. Not everyone's going to need the yoga ball. You need 4? Go get 4 yoga balls. But because everyone's tried it, because all kids had the opportunity to try it out, it totally destigmatizes it. Kids understand who needs it. And it just becomes, if a kid doesn't need a support or a tool or a strategy, they just don't think of it, right? Whether that's a lap desk or a 2-minute break or an audiobook or whatever, the myriad of tools and actions that are available. But like, if kids aren't using it, they probably don't know how, right? And so this is taking that time to say, okay, let's talk about this. How do I partner talk? How do I partner talk if I have a second language? Like, Katie, you talk about this all the time, like the barriers of partner talks, right? How am I going to use this? Flexible seating. That's so good. Yes, all these flexible seating. What if kids don't know how to use it? So, I mean, it's all of this. If we're going to introduce all these tools, they're great. But the regulation comes from teaching everybody how to use them and allowing students to decide what they need and what's going to work for them. And that's going to reduce a lot of those barriers. Manipulatives in math. Oh, I could go on. Calculators, pencil grips. I'm just saying.
So many things.
Many things.
So what's so interesting is like even way back in the day, like it wasn't even about you need to like, I wish that I could go back and explicitly teach some of these things. But in my classroom, it was essentially like, you know, sit or stand, wake up, you know, stand in the back if you need to, like, don't be disruptive to anyone else's learning. But certainly, you know, I always sit cross-legged. You can probably see my knees. I always sit crisscross applesauce when I'm presenting, and I would have gotten in trouble in class. I often did. Put your feet on the floor. And as an adult, I always sit with my legs crossed when I'm on a computer. And so it's like, you just think about, I would always like sit however you want. If you need to step out, fine. But because it was allowed, people rarely, I mean, they would like take breaks, but then stand up. I had a mirror in my classroom. They could like change their makeup or check if they had something on their face. And they'd stand up, go to the mirror, maybe like wander a little bit. But it was just so much a part of, if you need something, take advantage of it, that it wasn't like a really big deal to need to step outside. And I think that is like, how do we normalize the same opportunity we have in real life?
Mm-hmm. And if kids aren't using tools that you think would benefit them, teach it. Assume nothing.
Okay, Shelley, we're killing it on time here.
I'm so proud of us.
We are doing so amazing right now. I'm looking at our ideas here, and like we are actually like 8 minutes ahead of time, which gives us more
Did
time.
I skip a slide? I probably skipped a slide.
No, you didn't. I think you're so efficient. So we're gonna go to Fireside Chat, which everyone loves. Fireside Chat, because this is where we take your questions and we share an answer. Maybe it's not the answer, but we'll answer, all the questions that are remaining, and you can feel free to pop those in. There are 9 that are open right now, and I will start with them. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop the share so people can see us a little bit better, because all there is like a little fire. And just imagine the fire beside us. So the first one, Cass said, now I'm feeling bad because autism level up is for sure in agreement with Shelley's concerns. Folks should check out their website. So I'm going to put that in the chat.
Thank you, Cass.
Because we need to give love for level up. They're not looking to robotize children.
Thank you.
Must be the same. So, Cass, we hear you. We have that in the chat. We'll also add it to our notes. And I see lots of hearts. People are like, yes, there's
good. I love to hear that.
Yeah, not going to make Katie put her feet on the floor. 2 feet on the floor, eyes and knees towards me, Katie.
Now you're green. Now you're green and calm and ready for learning.
Oh my God. Oh, remember those charts?
Oh, remember, they're everywhere still, Katie. I don't need to remember. I saw one yesterday.
Not the clothespin charts where you're like in trouble and your thing moves?
Well, yeah, because like, you know, you got to be green. So what do you got to do to get to green? Like that's how regulation has become, right? You can't be too excited. You can't be too tired, which I get, but then it's defined as this is what it looks like to be green.
Alicia just put a vomit emoji, and that's how I'm feeling right now.
It's really frustrating because it has potential to have a huge impact, but it's so misunderstood. It's so misunderstood.
I would always be in trouble color.
Like I am rarely calm when I'm learning. I'm so excited sometimes I cry.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that we don't necessarily conform to regulation.
I mean, Katie, there's no box for us.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Shelley, because your expertise is, you know, in the special education support. I focus on how do we make learning environments inclusive for everyone.
Ready.
And so, first one, if there is time, Shelley, can you talk about how you would consider students' needs with high support, language, and cognitive needs in that UDL argumentative lesson? So, if you
That's a great question.
As it was, and now you have a student and you're writing an IEP and it's really focused on high support language and cognitive, how would that lesson change if we worked on it together?
When we're trying to make making grade level learning standards accessible, and this is my favorite thing to do because this is my research area, which is how do we like a grade 10 English class, right? We have a student who has an intellectual or cognitive disability. Like how what does that mean? How is that going to look for them? And so the first step is we still maintain that learning standard. Like this is not the learning standard is still there. And so I think part of the work on making this meaningful for kids with cognitive disabilities is, looking at how do you take a grade level standard and look at what's essential. Because meeting a grade level standard at the most complex level is not the goal for everybody, right? And so there's some work that I do, which is looking at a grade level standard and then creating a scaffold of what's essential. The potato, Karen, yes, what's essential. So the metaphor that I use is the potato. Like the goal is not for everyone to eat a fully baked potato with all of the toppings. Katie, have you heard this one? All of the toppings.
That's when I first fell in love with you, was Dr. Baked Potato.
To be like, if the goal is to eat a baked potato, we have to start with the potato. And that really actually is the concept. And when you find the concept of a grade level learning standard, it's not simple, it's bigger. And often you can apply that concept in more accessible ways. And so for some students, that concept is enough for them to access. For some students, they need an access point to the concept. And so my favorite example of this was a science 10 class. It was chemistry unit. And they were learning about the periodic table of elements. And this teacher was just like, there's a little guy with Down syndrome in there. And the teacher's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, okay, inclusion is good. I don't know what to do, which is fair. He's like, I wasn't taught how to do this. And that's a reasonable answer, but he was also open to try. And that's what we need. That's what we need, right? So we're like, okay, like, why are you teaching the periodic table of elements? What's the goal? What's the standard? And when you look at the actual concept of the periodic table of elements, it's that the world is organized. The world is organized. Elements of the world are organized. And you think about that, you're like, everything's organized. And if you look at how the periodic table of elements is organized, heavy and light, metal and non-metal, those are concepts that are accessible to way more than just students in a grade 10 chemistry class. And so for the student, what we created access to was the goal was still to understand that the world is organized and to still understand elements of the periodic table, which is what's heavy, what's light, what's the different states of matter. And he nailed it. He was like, I got this. And you know what? That actually helped everyone because no one knew why they were learning about the periodic table elements. And so there's a misunderstanding that we have to simplify standards to create access for intellectual disability, but it's not. It's making it bigger. It's making it more relevant and connected to students. And so my research, when I was working with high school teachers to do this work, because the access goal is derived from the grade level, it actually gave an opportunity for students to meet grade level. And 3 of the 5 students actually met the grade level goal or met the learning standard at grade level and earned credit for the class. Like they passed the class. Like it's something that a lot of people don't think is possible, but it was when you provide the scaffold that students need and the time that they need to do it. So, one of the teachers cried. She was like, I thought it was their brains that was the barrier. And I'm like, nope, nope, it's so possible. And so part of the answer is creating that scaffolded approach to be like, what's the entry point to that concept? And then, connecting it to kids, bringing in visuals, bringing in concrete ideas and examples. And if I've ever seen anything that benefits all kids, it's that. It is pretty powerful once you see it happen.
So how would you change the lesson on
so thanks for bringing me back to that.
Produce an opinion about that's not funny, that is funny. Like what would change there?
So I would still want to work with that text. Do you know what I mean? So I would probably, if I was your support teacher, I would create a parallel text that kept to the concept of when you feel really sad, is it like, do you feel okay when someone makes a joke? Like, I would just simplify, but keep the concept, but simplify the text, bring in some visuals, and then probably teach the concept of the argumentative, that argument, and be like, okay, so is this something you agree or disagree with that's really accessible? And then I would say, okay, well, here's another example. Do you agree or disagree with this? So I would probably create another example that was more accessible, that would be really clear about, is this something you agree or disagree with and why? And then apply the more complex text, but I would still want to use that text.
Yep. So it's almost like a pre-read of the text.
Because if you create a pre-read that's visual, then they could listen to the grade level text and absolutely be able to draw from it the big ideas, which is what the goal would be, that concept.
Yeah. So I want to highlight something in the chat. I'm going to put it in again because I put it all there already. And Michelle had asked about, like, I love the idea of making text accessible, but we don't have it in our budget to get audiobooks yet. And a lot of great ideas are popping up. And one of the ideas was put in the Q&A. So I just put it in the chat so everybody could see it. But essentially, there is a site called Bookshare, I guess, that is a library of audiobooks. What I also learned is, like, our local library, mine's Boston Public Library, has a ton of audiobooks, like, on an app. So even if your students go to your local library and get a library subscription or a library membership or whatever it's called, and then they might be able to access it on their own. I know that is how my daughter accesses a lot of the audiobooks. Even though she does have audiobooks available to her at school, there's like no way to get it at home. So she does have it when she's at school, but like we just download it on her library app, and then she has it, and we'll play it in the car on the way to lacrosse. And her twin brother, who is very capable of decoding, is like, this is awesome. Like, let's just get this baby done before dinner. So also Sora, there's so many things here. 2 birds, 1 stone. And I too, Cass, I have the Libby app. Oh, that's worldwide. I have it in Massachusetts. I love it. I am really committed to really into a lot of chick read. Anything on Reese Witherspoon's recommended reading list is where I'm at.
And like, it's not perfect, but the readers are getting better. And so I think, like, as that technology improves, I think this is going to become more and more accessible for kids, for sure.
Okay, I love this because this is, Courtney, do you allow more time for students with intellectual disabilities to complete work? I allow any student.
Any student, yeah.
To complete work. So
when the goal is the goal, time isn't a goal. Like, there's like logical cutoff times for assessment, but.
So I never had an issue with it. The way that I designed my class, and I talk about it in UDL now, is that I designed my class on Friday. I did not provide any explicit instruction, and I did not introduce any new material. So there was no new pathways for self-differentiated learning. There was no new assessments. Friday was never touched with any sort of assessment, and we used to call it hooray, it's rewrite day. And they would come in, and I would have the slide deck, and it was balloons, and then it was always like options of like, if you need more time on anything that we did Monday to Thursday, I need to meet with these 4 students. Here's my schedule. If you want to get a head start on looking at some of the things for next week, like, because reading processing time is so wildly different, but it would basically be, it's
win at a classroom level.
It was hooray, it's rewrite day. Like, my students will still remember it. The last couple of years that I was in the classroom, because it was like, I wanted students to be able to finish exploring the resources they needed to explore, to be able to revise things once they got my feedback. So the only dead end of revision was at the end of the quarter. But
exactly. They
could always go back in, and if they had missed anything or if they wanted to revise it. And then, I used to have exemplars of different things, and that allowed me to do small group instruction if necessary. But it was just like the chillest, greatest day. And it was before a bunch of wellness rules, which are totally, I respect, but this is like back in the glory days where we didn't have that yet. And one of my classes basically decided on their own. It was a really small class, like, 18 or something. Yeah. And they decided on their own that every Friday, one of them would bring in 2 dozen donuts. And they committed.
There's some wellness.
they committed to this and were like, oh my gosh, Novak, we have you first period on Friday, and it would be amazing if like we just took turns and like brought in breakfast. And I was like, if anyone can't do it, let me know. I'll bring it in. And those babies stuck with it. It was like the greatest. I was like, it's Friday, first period.
I love it.
I like butternut. And but no, like that's how I would handle it. So there was no stress ever for I'm not going to be able to finish this. I don't have enough time, because there was always an opportunity to come back and spiral around.
Can I add on to that?
Please.
So, we started this whole conversation today with this backwards design idea, right? Knowing what the learning standards are. There was one class that I was in, and they had something similar, like on Fridays. And so they could do rewrites. They could all the things you mentioned, but they also used that time to say, okay, so what are the learning standards we did this week? And what evidence do we have of these standards? And so actually helping kids to show, everything we did, every activity we did is evidence of our learning. What are your best examples, and how are you going to polish them so you start to justify that you've learned these? And can I share another metaphor?
Please.
Okay. Because I love this idea of this like rewrite Fridays, because, part of this is, again, like handing over that student control to have that agency. And so they said to the students, like, imagine you're a detective, right? Like when you're a detective and you're walking into a crime scene, like you got to solve the crime. So when you walk in, there's evidence everywhere. You don't know what's useful yet. So you got to collect it. You got to organize it. You got to label it. So when the time comes to solve the crime, you choose your best pieces of evidence. But also remember, if you're going to present your evidence to the court, you can't just show the same piece multiple times. You got to corroborate it. They love trying to say that word. Corroborate, to say, I got to show this from different perspectives and different formats, because that's what that triangulation piece is. And so part of that rewrite time is, yes, let's look at all of our work, and actually also ask and say, hey, what are my best pieces of evidence here, so that I'm also thinking in the long term, like, how do I justify my learning in this learning standard? And so it moves away from just being like a list of tasks that kids have to complete, because they do have to do them, but also like with that lens of, what are the pieces I'm going to present to the court, and justifying that learning piece, because some kids may not do every single activity in a course. But if they can justify with the evidence that they have that they've met their learning goals, it just brings a lot of flexibility. And as we play with time, right, to allow students to say, okay, like, do I have the evidence of the potato, or do they have the evidence of a fully loaded potato? Like, what do I actually have in front of me? And how am I using that to justify my learning? Like, those going together puts the students in the driver's seat, and whoever's doing that justification is the one that's doing the learning. And we usually do it. We're usually doing it.
So one more question here. And then the final reflection on the questions and answers. We got to a lot of them. I
love it.
And we've answered 34 questions.
I'm so proud of us.
I know. I mean, that might be like a record. Okay, so here we go. Can you touch on the question about how UDL and SDI overlap? Now, what I will say is that there were some times where I got very, very aware of being inclusive, that sometimes some of the specially designed instruction was a part of what was available to all students. So sometimes it's a little bit gray, because like what you would say is, universal design for learning is first best instruction. It's options and choices that are available to everyone, recognizing that some students need really specialized tools. So as an example, you might have one student who needs like a Braille reader, and that would be something that would be specially designed, and it would be put in my classroom specifically for a student. Now, I would always have audio available, right? That would be something that would be universally designed. There would always be an opportunity to use a screen reader, or for students to, for example, be able to listen to a classmate read something out loud. But generally an IEP is like, this is a strategy, or this is a tool that must be provided for a specific student, almost like a glasses prescription. Mm-hmm. So, I would always, for example, if I had a video use closed captioning. I was always really aware of if we were to go to a cafeteria or an auditorium, I would always use a microphone. But for certain students I had to wear one of an FM system around my neck. So that would be like a really concrete example of, yes, we have certain tools and strategies available for all students, but then there are some students who need really, really specific pathways, and we want to make sure those are available. What I found was a little bit more challenging is the more I co-planned and the more students who were included, I found that sometimes when I would look at the specially designed instruction, it was something that was like pretty well built in to some of the work that I was doing already, but it would not have been provided in other classrooms with other teachers. And so what the specially designed instruction ensures is that students have access to the strategies they need, even when they might have someone who is not universally designing instruction. And David Rose, who's the father of UDL, always said that it was such a shame that we had to have IEPs, because you shouldn't need a legal document to give a student what they need to be successful. And of course, he's a huge advocate of, all students and them getting the support. But he's like, the fact that document is like adding up the minutes and so compliance heavy is a Band-Aid for a system that's really, really broken, because we have to go that far just to make sure kids have what they need. And, I'm sure as a parent, as a teacher, as a leader, you work with teachers who are willing to do whatever they need to do to make students successful, but not all teachers are there yet. So how do we provide them with the resources, the support? And then also we need this legal document really specifically to ensure that we're doing what students need to learn.
Part of our IEP renewal process is really breaking that down. So when we talk about accommodations, really being clear what's individualized. So the vision impairment one is perfect. Not even vision impairment, vision needs is really a great example, because an individualized essential support would be Braille. That's individualized. And so on the IEP, to actually communicate to a teacher who may not know what's individualized or universal, to say, these tools right here, these are individualized. These supports and strategies are also can meet the need, but these can be used in universal ways. And so actually like separating the accommodations to be, this is essential and individualized, and these are universal, almost granting permission. This legal document can say, and you can do this for everybody, to really kind of fill in the gaps, because like someone like Katie, who has a lot of experience doing this, sometimes it's so intuitive, you don't even realize you're providing that support and structure within your instruction. So to really articulate, within the accommodations of an IEP, yes, this is a must. And this is also a must, but guess what? You can do this with everyone, and just helping people to see that you don't need, it's permission granting, right? Like it's okay that all of the kids have access to an FM system and a screen reader that's still designed for vision needs, but it's also not going to harm other students. And we found like a lot of teachers were like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that. And that's, making sure that the students' needs are being met, but also, granting permission and building the capacity of teachers who may not have that experience yet, and that's okay.
So I'm reading right now. I just pulled up my own daughter's IEP.
Yeah.
Just to kind of look at like, what is the specially designed instruction that the student will need to complete this goal?
Yeah.
So just as an example, again, how it would be really, as an educator, looking at this and saying, okay, look, what does this mean? So one of the goals is, what type of specially designed instruction is necessary for the student to make effective progress towards, specific goals? And it says, not penalized for spelling errors, provision of instructional support in ELA and math, and explicit sequential instruction. There would be no student ever in any of my classroom ever that would be penalized for spelling errors. It was a consistent pattern, I might like note it. But again, there are some teachers that would be like -10, -5, minus this, right? So in that exact thing, the accommodations, the accommodations are like allowing her to use spell check when necessary.
Anybody?
But the special designed instruction is you cannot take off any points for spelling.
Right. I see.
So it's like, we'll let anyone, use these tools, but like for a kid who has really significant dyslexia, she's just going to right click the first word that comes up when something is squiggly underlined. And it's not going to be spelled wrong. It's going to be a totally different word. So I think it's like a really good example of like, we want all students to be able to produce coherent writing. One accommodation that would be universal is when you're using a keyboard, use the tools that are available to you, Grammarly, spell check. Specifically for my daughter, you cannot take off any points for spelling errors, but that for me wouldn't mean anything because I would never take off points for spelling errors.
But it's there in case the person's not you.
Yep. So Debbie, that would be an example of an accommodation would be students can use spell check. Even with spell check, I promise you'll have spelling errors. So specially designed instruction, for example, might be this student is not going to be penalized for something like that. The other
so then with the Wilson reading program, that would be SDI.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Another one is instruction in positive self-talk and growth mindset. Again, every kid in my class is getting that. But she really needs it. So it's like, it's kind of a slippery slope for a really inclusive teacher. But again, that right there needs to happen in every class every day.
It becomes a blueprint then. That's how I kind of want to think of IEPs. They're the blueprint for the whole class. That's what they need to be.
Yes. So everyone, tell us. We want to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from the Fireside chat? And then we're going to send it over for an optimistic close with some of our favorite people. So 2 minutes. We want to see the chat. What resonated with you? What are you feeling affirmed by? What, are you like, yes, I am ready to go here. And Shelley and I will do a quick scroll here as you're sharing what resonated, what do you want to carry with you, and what do you think was your biggest takeaway in today's webinar, Miss Shelley?
Oh my goodness. Every time I work with you, I'm like, I have more like snippets of how just like how like a general education teacher and like a special education teacher, like it really is a parenting model. You know what I mean? Like it's us supporting everyone, not divide and conquer. And I every time I'm like, again, reaffirmed that it's the only way it can work is if we work together.
And everyone loves the we have a lot of food analogies. People are like, cupcakes.
You know how many potatoes I eat when I go travel?
Oh yeah, there's probably a lot of buffets. Okay, I love it. It takes a village. IEP is a blueprint. Oh yeah. Oh my, hooray, it's rewrite day. I would love
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. We use the batter. Okay, I am loving all this. So we only have a couple of minutes left here. So as people share their biggest takeaways, I am going to send it back over to our amazing team, all of the Washington people. So Lindsay, I see on our notes here that it is your turn. 2 minutes ago, we tried really hard. And
that's okay. I plan ahead. I've universally designed for your time frame. It's great. I'm not worried about it.
Windows of arrival time.
Right. And I just want to say thank you so much. We have had an incredible audience from across the state and even people outside of our state. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of all of these organizations that you see on your screen. Again, we've been working together for 4 years, and this is a great culmination of all of that. I know you guys are already sort of sharing in there what you took away from the Fireside chat, but if you have the capacity, I would love for you to share in some way, how you already have or how will you use what you've learned, from the entire session and this whole experience. So just thank you. We'd love to know how these things are being put out there. Again, the recording and resources are available at that URL. So cstep-wa.org/inclusionary practices. And we will be posting this video along with the other videos and resources as soon as we can. Remember that clock hours will be awarded. It's going to take us a little while. I think my email from WEA said, don't ask any questions till after April 19th. So give them a few weeks to get those surveys out there. And I also just wanted to make one plug. We have one more huge Inclusionary Practices collaborative event. We are doing an event somewhere in the SeaTac area. This is for Washington educators on June 14th, and it's going to be the Inclusionary Best Practices and Sustainability Colloquium. Basically, we're all going to get together and tell our stories, our success stories, and really share the resources and the stories that have worked the best. All of these 4 years, we've really made some differences that we're very proud of, and we want to give people time to see those resources, collaborate together, do some, role-alike conversations, and see how we can keep this inclusionary movement going. So there is, if somebody on my team can stick that link in the chat, that'd be great. If you want to register, that would be amazing. It is free to Washington educators. So with that, Shelley and Katie, or like I like to say, Kelly Novak, Doctors Kelly Novak, I cannot thank you enough for your time, your wisdom, and your grace and your patience. So with that, on behalf of the cadre and OSPI, I just can't thank you enough.
Well,
Thanks, everyone.
I loved being here, Shelley. It was like such an amazing experience. I am humbled to have an opportunity to work with you so often, and this is just the beginning of much more trouble that we're going to get ourselves
We
into.
have a whole journey of trouble and fun to have together. So
yes,
look out.
The good trouble. We are here for it. So thank you both so very much.
Go have an incredible week, everyone. Bye, Katie. See you later.
Bye, Shelley. Have much more trouble that we're going to get ourselves
We
into.
have a whole journey of trouble and fun to have together. So
yes,
look out.
The good trouble. We are here for it. So thank you both so very much.
Go have an incredible week, everyone. Bye, Katie. See you later.
Bye, Shelley. Have much more trouble that we're going to get ourselves